Got another unpopular opinion coming at you. But first, what's going on, backpackers? My name is Dave, and this channel is called Off Grid. I'm into backpacking, hiking, camping, and gear. If you like those things too, do me a favor, smash that subscribe button and that like button. It really helps out the channel, and I greatly appreciate it. Today's crosshairs, we've got a new piece of tech that is taking the backpacking world by storm, and it's kind of a joke. I don't know. I'm not really buying into it. But we're talking about the Flextail Zero Pump. Is it worth your time? Is it worth your hard-earned money? Let's talk about it right now, and let's dive right into it. As of the date of this recording, they don't even have it on their main website, so I've got the specs and everything else kind of pulled up here on the Indiegogo website, which is sort of like a Kickstarter. It's a crowdfunding website that you can kind of be like an early adopter, which basically means like you pay for one of the first prototypes, like the people who pay for the first iterations of the Apple phone, and then they find something wrong with it. There is definitely at least one major thing wrong with this thing that I can see so far. We're going to get into that stuff. We're going to get into the pros and cons and all that kind of good stuff so that you can make an informed decision as to whether or not this new piece of tech is worth your time. Let's do it. Let's break it down. So I've got the Indiegogo site pulled up here. They are plastering all over the place, even on the side of the unit itself. So it's basically the size of like a large lipstick tube. Think of, one of the bigger chapsticks, Blistick type things, or the EOS tubes, something like that. Maybe a little bit larger than that. So really tiny and small. So decently losable. That's not even a word, but you can definitely lose this thing quite easily because it's getting so small. But they plaster all over the side of the body, as well as on this site here, saying that it's 1.2 ounces. The whole thing is 1.2 ounces. Well, that's not exactly true. I'll get into that in a hot second as well. It's saying that you can inflate and deflate the pad anywhere from like 25 to 50 times, something like that, because it really depends on the type of pad that you have. It says as fast as 50 seconds to blow up a pad, 2-in-1 inflator deflator. It has 6 different nozzles, so it can fit pretty much any pad that you strap this thing onto. It's saying that it has a replaceable battery, which we're going to get into in a hot second. And I think that's pretty much it. I mean, all it is like a small fan, right? That, you put the pump on one, or the adapter on one side, and it blows it in. You put it on the other side, and it can deflate your pad for you. Any pad worth its weight in gold has a quick dump to it, so I never really use a pump for the deflate feature. But that's all it is. If you're familiar with Flextail or Gigapump, they have other iterations with that's slightly heavier that also has an additional light source. This one does not. So they're really just trying to cut as much weight as possible. And that's kind of the gimmick behind this thing, right? It's the lightest pump that's on the market. And that's pretty much it. I don't think it's waterproof either. So on their Indiegogo page here, you can be an early adopter and kind of pick it up before they go live with their probably version 2 after they iron out the kinks of this first version here. And they have different pricing models. Like you can get, just one without a battery in it. You can get one with a battery in it. I think they had like the option to get like 2, 3, up to 5 that you can get. They have bundles now because they have other things in their shop, like the insect repellent and lantern combo as well. So many different tiers that you can kind of get into, sort of similar again to Kickstarter or Patreon or what have you. All right, so all that kind of normal stuff out of the way here. I don't know what the other specs are. I can't find it. Oh, here it is. We've got 1.02 inches, and that's probably the width, and then just under 3 inches tall, 2.95 inches tall. So, really, really tiny. Let's get into the pros and cons right now. For the pros, it's definitely the lightest weight pump that's on the market, right? It is at least an ounce lighter than anything else that I've seen. I have the Gigapump, and that is around 3 ounces. I think the Flextail version 2.0 of their like tiny pump series is a little bit higher than that. I think their first iteration, or I don't know what version it was, the one before this latest one was somewhere around that same weight as the Gigapump, around 3 ounces. I think the Flextail 2 is like closer to 3.5, something like that. I could be wrong. But it's definitely heavier than this model. So it's the lightest pump on the market. and it is also super low in your overall pack size, right? So even comparing that to like their Tiny Pump 2 or the Giga Pump, it's a little bit more cylindrical. It's kind of like a mini can size, and they're all cylindrical in shape, but this one's just a little bit longer. I think the other pro is just like all the other pumps, you can use it to fan the flames of a fire and get that going, kind of stoke the fire a little bit more quickly. So that's definitely a good use for it. Let's get into the cons right now, and there's you know, a couple of hard-hitting ones in this category here. The first and foremost, like I had mentioned, they're plastering the overall weight, right, of this unit, and they're saying 1.2 ounces, 1.2 ounces, lightest ever, right? But that is the weight before you put in that rechargeable battery. So they have, I think it's called an RCR 123A battery, which is, I was thinking it was going to be like a AAA or something like a rechargeable AAA or something. It's a very odd shape for a battery too, so it's not a battery that is, you know, common. It's not one that, you know, you normally think of, AA, AAA, you know, CD or whatever. The overall weight once you put the battery in is closer to 1.8 ounces, so it's closer to that 2 ounce mark, which at that weight is, I think they were kind of backpedaling at that point, going like, well, the Flextail 2 is at like 3. 1 sounds better, or closer to 1 sounds better than closer to 2, and it's actually closer to 2. So you're only really saving somewhere around an ounce, maybe a little bit over an ounce, over their Flextail 2 version. And then the other big con, in my opinion, is the fact that it doesn't have a light like the other one does. So at least with the other pumps, you're getting a secondary light that you can use as a lantern when you're at camp, or, you know, you hook it up in, you know, a little loop or whatever in your tent, and you can have sort of that incandescent light in your tent on the lower setting there too. So that's also an additional benefit, other than just having, like, you know, your headlamp or having to use your cell phone. It's just nice to have that secondary light at times. And then the last big con that I can see, like I said, it kind of goes along with that battery. You're still having that potential extra drain on your battery bank. It's not a huge battery. I forget how much it is, maybe like 600 milliamps or something like that. So it's not that big, and you probably won't have to recharge it on a weekend trip, but just the very simple fact that it's an additional electronic that you have to think about recharging is just another negative, in my opinion. All right, so pros and cons out of the way. There's not a lot to talk about with this little device here, but the biggest question here is, and what you probably clicked on this video for, is it worth it? Is it worth your time? Is it worth your money? I'm seeing the pricing models here somewhere as low for like the early adopter without the battery, somewhere around $30, and it goes up from there. I think, you know, with the battery, if you were to get the battery with it, it's somewhere around $36 to $40. And is it worth it? So the only thing I can say here is that if you're only saving an ounce off of the prior model, especially if you have the Flextail 2 pump or any of the other pumps that have a lantern, I'm not really sure if it's worth that additional cost to pick it up. I think the other models as well are somewhere around the $30 to $35 mark, so it's somewhere around the same price point. And all you're really doing is shaving an ounce and getting rid of that light source. So is that extra ounce really going to count at the end of the day? I got a follow-up that I'm going to get into right now to maybe persuade you a little bit more in that direction. Second thing here I'm going to say is that you most likely, and this is the point that I really want to hammer home, you most likely already have a pump sack that they give you for the pad that usually weighs somewhere around the same weight as this pump here. So you know, I have the older version of the Nemo Tensor, and I also have the Sea to Summit Etherlite XT, and both of those pump sacks that come with the pad are somewhere around that 2 ounce mark. So you're not really saving any weight by going with this electronic here. The other thing I would say is that, you know, if the total weight was what they're stating and kind of plastering all over the device of 1.2 ounces, if it was closer to that, then it would be a little bit more of a persuasive argument to pick it up. But being closer to 2 ounces, you know, even for the most gram conscious of gram weenies, that's a really tough sell, I would say. And that's the last thing I'm going to say about that, kind of piggybacking off of that last statement, is that where does it fit in? Like, I don't think it really fits in anywhere. The only thing I can think of is, you know, if you're on the fence and you haven't bought a pump before and you want to get the lightest one, then maybe you choose that one if you don't need that secondary light source. But I think a lot of us who have been in the game, so to speak, for a little bit of time probably already have that previous iteration. I wouldn't necessarily recommend picking up this version because it's not really doing you much of an advance. You're not really like pushing your game forward by dropping like 1 whole ounce. I would just, like I said, just kind of switch over or go back to your pump sack if you're trying to do like an ultralight setup. And again, you know, if you're a through hiker and you're really trying to count all the grams and everything, you know, your pump sack is for the most part bulletproof. You don't necessarily have to worry about that as much. With this one, you have to worry about, you know, losing juice or bringing extra juice in a battery bank out there to charge it back up. So it doesn't really fit in with the through hiking crowd and the ultralighters. And it's sort of a tough sell for like your weekend warriors and, you know, the people who just go out on a few trips a year anyway. And if you're car camping, I would definitely go with, you know, a bigger pump anyway, even if it's the tiny pump, because you have that secondary light source. You're not really worried about the weight as much. So where does it fit in that scenario? I can't really say. So if I were to recommend one, I would probably still recommend picking up the Flextail 2 version or my Giga Pump, because it was a couple bucks cheaper, and just getting that secondary light source out of it. So I think this one is too gimmicky. I'm gonna say hard pass on this one. I'm definitely not gonna pick it up. If they threw me a free one, then I would definitely give it a go and give it a try. I wouldn't say no to free, right? But as far as like shelling out my own money for it, I would say skip it. Use the pump sack that you already have for your pad. Not all of them are the best. I understand that. Not all of them are 2 ounces. Some of them are heavier. I understand that as well. But I would just pass on this one. I don't really see any big reason to get it. But I want to know all of your thoughts down in the comments below. Let me know anything that I missed. I probably, you know, overshot one crucial thing or whatever. Let me know if I missed anything down below. But I love doing these speculation videos because you know, there's always a lot of hype and a lot of positivity around new stuff that comes out in space, and that's all well and good. We want to make sure that we continue to push those boundaries and get those cool, nifty gadgets out there. But this one just kind of seems like, you know, something to put out there just to put out there. So I am going to pass on this one. I have to admit too that I was originally intrigued by this idea, but I think it fell flat pretty quickly once I kind of dove into the specs on it and looked at it a little bit more closely. That's going to do it for this one this week, guys. Really appreciate you. Thanks so much for dropping by. And remember, if you're headed off grid, make sure you do your research and you make it a safe one. And I'll see you on the next one.